Happy politics and welcome to what I know is your favorite BC politics podcast. I know it's mine, and I'm pretty sure it's the favorite of my co-host as well. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
It's Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for ICBA. In my we're packing up, we're moving offices, and let me just tell you, the studio is the last thing to go. So everything else is chaos. But for you, the gentle viewer, all you'll see is the usual political punditry and bad takes that we offer.
We should start, you know what, let's start with I was going to make a big deal about saying how this is the most serious issue of the week, but humor seems to be in short supply in BC these days. So we'll start with a Twitter firestorm about nothing, spoiler alert. Jordan Bateman, the war on pickup trucks. Caused quite the Twitter hullabaloo over the weekend. A Globe and Mail article saying, pickup trucks take up too much space in the city. The article itself wasn't too bad, but there were some other retweets of it saying, let's just, ban the sale of trucks rather in cities. And as Twitter firestorms often do, it snowballed from there. Oh, my God.
Well, let's take it in two bits. So first of all, I think it built on a previous anti-pickup truck tirade by the city of Vancouver, in which pickup trucks were deemed a great evil that must be expunged from the roadways of Vancouver or taxed to death to the point where you can't actually afford to have one there. And then you get the elitist, latte sipping, condo dwelling, hasn't been to his office in 18 months because he can work a cozy, an easy job at home, doesn't get hand dirty, elitists at the Globe and Mail writing the anti-pickup truck. I'm just my wild perception. I have no basis in fact. He's probably a very nice person. But look, there is a lot of sensitivity, especially in this province where we already have the great urban-rural divide, which has, I think, been heightened by COVID and certainly by the wildfire situation.
Absolutely.
There is two British Columbias right now. One where I'm living, where you're living, beautiful, clear, sunny. This is great two-dose summer. Everyone's enjoying themselves. And then there's the rest of BC, which is covered in wildfire smoke, thousands of evacuation notices, Lytton burning down, 2 people dead. Like, it is a completely different world. Beyond Merritt. It sounds like Merritt's kind of where the smoke socks in. By the way, the smoke now being seen as far east as Regina, and yet untouched here in the Lower Mainland. So you have all that kind of foundational layers. And then you get this guy landing on top saying, pickup trucks are the great evil in cities. And people's heads went. Now I can tell you, it's not lightening up. On ICBA's Facebook page this morning, I popped up a post, linking to that piece and, passionately defending the case of pickup trucks and the many blue-collar workers who use them. And within 45 minutes, it had, 75 likes and 25 comments. And this really got under people's skin. But again, it goes back to that old political truism that I keep saying here. Everyone thinks everyone else should live like they do. And that is simply not the way the universe works. Nor should it. We'd be very boring if we were all homogenous beings. But there's a sense among rural people that it's urban elites wanting to force them into their condo, no car, ride your bike lifestyle, and the rural and blue collar folks saying that's not practical. I got to move tools. I got to move, materials. I'm in a rural area.
Yeah, through the snow.
Yeah, exactly.
My sense from reading the article, because I saw the firestorm first and then read the article, my sense was the author was trying to make a slightly different point, and it didn't come out well. And the point was, if you are an urban latte drinking person, which, would describe myself, and you don't need a pickup truck, please don't get one because there's only so much space on the roads. Okay, but it quickly came into no trucks because that's how Twitter arguments always go. And it's, there was never any thought for the plumbers and contractors and people who have to drive through blizzards in the winter. And it kind of became, yet another stupid, completely polarized, you're either completely in or completely out Twitter argument. I don't know. It was ridiculous. People saying there's absolutely no need to ever have a pickup truck in a city. Of course there's a need to sometimes have a pickup truck in the city. I hope you never need a plumber.
Yes. Yeah, a plumber or someone to fix your latte machine at home, or
Yes.
to transport tools. Like, if that's the point this author was trying to make, it's a stupid one in itself. Like, wandering around Victoria, where you live, and Vancouver here, I'm not seeing a lot of pickup trucks in the urban areas. Like, this does not seem to be a major scourge on the landscape, mainly because we've priced out a lot of the blue-collar workers out of these cities. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's those flippant things like, oh, that mill is closing. Just teach them to code. Oh, they could all become coders. Like,
Yeah.
It's so flip and so tone deaf, and it just makes you seem like such, so elitist. Like, I hate that kind of stuff. So I'm glad it drew some fire on Twitter. I think rural people in British Columbia, like I said, are very, very sensitive right now, and rightfully so. Urban folks, we're living in a completely different world than they're feeling right now. And I see it when I read Deanie Moore's pieces on the Orca. Like, of all the authors on the Orca, I think Deanie Moore's are the ones that get the most clicks by me, because she's living in, I believe, 100 Mile House. 100 Mile?
Yes.
And it's just a completely different view of the world and the political issues than I get in even suburban Langley, and then certainly than they get in Yaletown, where my boss Chris lives, for example.
Paul froze there for a second. I agree completely. It's totally different, and the thing I like about her is it's never coming from anger. You'll see some, sometimes frustration, but often just sort of, explaining what it's like, what the world's like from 100 Mile House, as opposed to, Burnaby, Vancouver, Victoria. And so, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Everyone would do well to read more Deanie Moore. Speaking of urban issues, that largely urban issues anyway. Now, this is a report. We're going to talk about the housing report that came out, a couple months ago now. And the news that came out of it was a little unfortunate in that everyone pounced on two recommendations out of many, and they were basically new taxes, wanting to remove the homeowners grant and possibly imposing a capital gains tax on the sale of homes. Now, the homeowners grant was the thing that seized all the attention in BC, because it very quickly became a bit of a political football, with the BC Liberals wanting the NDP to clarify their position on it, and the NDP saying, "Oh, we won't do that." And it is a political football, and whoever does remove the homeowners grant will have merry hell to pay in the next election, I think. That said, the report contained quite a lot of recommendations that might address the housing crunch across Canada, but particularly in the Lower Mainland. And Jordan, you finally had a chance to read the report. What, aside from the stuff that got legislated on Twitter months ago, what leapt out at you?
Well, it really was a tale of two reports. So like you, I saw the media coverage, and I didn't have a chance, busy last few weeks, to sit down and actually read it. I made time on Friday to sit down and read it. And like you said, it is completely different than what the media says. So, the flashy, major tax increases are what splash. But that's really kind of the last half of the report. The first half of the report, frankly, it was like we could have written it at ICBA. Like, it was free market principles. There's not enough supply to meet the demand. Government screwing things up by choking it out with red tape. Talks about the need a George Affleck idea, I believe, hard zoning, reducing. This is not a George Affleck idea, so he's pro public engagement, but changing the way public hearings happen in order to get better feedback earlier in processes. Capturing value when you do invest in massive transportation projects. Like, it all makes a lot of sense. And you look at the who's on the panel and who wrote it. I see it as kind of the Jock Finlayson, Helmut Pastrick section. Before you get into the more Joy McPhail, the chair of the BC Nonprofit Housing Association. Before you get into their kind of area, I really see that as being very strong. So, I think for us at ICBA, we're digesting it still. I think you'll see us talk about some of these recommendations and support them. Not all of them, but a lot of this is good stuff, and I do hope that the David Eby's of the world, who according to Von Parr, are clearly very frustrated with local government processes and decision making, much like Christy Clark was, much like Gordon Campbell was, much like Mike Harcourt was, much like go back in time. I do hope that maybe the NDP would be willing to tackle some of these red tape issues in order to get more housing affordability going. Even the title of it, right? Opening doors, unlocking housing supply for affordability. That is not about taxation. That is the a very important aspect of this. So, yeah, I was kind of surprised. The report did not match a lot of the coverage and punditry I'd seen on it.
If you're trying to tell me that Twitter somehow and social media and indeed the media managed to take a complicated situation and indeed nuanced report and turn it into a false binary, I will not have that, Jordan. That does not happen in the year 2021. We're far more sophisticated than that.
I know, obviously. Well, look, and I don't blame it. Like, I'm a tax crusader, so you look at taking away the housing homeowners grant. That's crazy. That's a $600 tax increase on every homeowner in the province. So it doesn't make that part obviously is going to get the attention, but there should be more deep dive into the first couple sections of this report because it is very good, very interesting, and certainly highlights the issues behind it. There's also some interesting analysis on interest rates, and yet interest rates being low key help keep inflation down, but on the other side it opens up puts a lot of pressure on the housing supply because more people can buy. It actually looks at whether or not population projections actually get met, which is another interesting thing because how many times have we heard in the last 15 years there'll be 1 million more people by 2040? Well, we're already at 2021, and will there be 1 million more? All these different kind of issues pop up. So, well worth taking the time to dig through the incendiary parts and read the actual guts of the report.
Incendiary indeed, and not just because of the situation across BC right now. As we now, for those our loyal listeners and watchers, we will not be doing the show over the next 2 weeks because, hey, Jordan and I are allowed to take vacations too. And so what we're going to do is kind of take a look ahead for the rest of the summer. And you and I have both picked out 3 politicians each that we should watch for various reasons over the course of of what remains of the summer. I guess we'll check back in 2 weeks or indeed at the end of the summer and see whether they were worth watching or not. Yep. I will let you begin. Why don't we go one each rather than you listing all 3? We'll do one at a time.
Sure. First, just a couple honorable mentions. Kevin Falcon, obviously front-runner in the BC Liberal leadership race. I saw he was back in PG. I've been invited to Beans and Jeans, which is like a classic Falcon event being put on by Ian Patton in Delta, so looking forward to that. Also, Shirley Bond, leader of the opposition, and certainly a huge voice right now with what's going on in rural BC. So I just want to make sure I mention them first. But number 1 on the list of who I'm keeping an eye on this summer is Renee Merrifield, the last contender, widely rumored contender for the BC Liberal leadership race. The only one not in the race officially, other than Aaron Gunn, who has his exploratory committee. Is Renee going into this race? Is this something that she's willing to invest the next year of her life into? And then if she wins further, she's got a great team. It seems like a very smart kind of campaign focus. I think there's a need. I think there's a good spot for her in this race. But I want to see, you got to see progress. At some point, even if it's not an announcement, we have to start seeing more of Renee Merrifield around the province. Right now we're inundated as BC Liberal members with emails from the official campaigns. That does give a real sense that, okay, these are the 4 who are running and that'll be it. But I'm keeping an eye on Renee in Kelowna.
It'll be interesting to see if she chooses BC Day to launch because, at a certain point, you can't forego the entire summer Beans and Jeans and barbecue circuit. So, if it's not then people will start to ask questions whether or not it's really going to happen. And maybe she's got another strategy. As you say, she does have a team assembled, so it looks as though she's going to go. Yep. But until she formally launches or informally launches like Ellis Ross did, we don't know.
Yeah, and one of the things that leadership candidates have to do is they have to meet fundraising targets along the way.
Yes.
In order to get access to the BC Liberal membership list, things like that. I can tell you that I haven't received any Renee Merrifield fundraising requests, anything like that. Not that not that I'm wealthy and would, but some of these other candidates have reached out, and certainly through the emails now they're very regularly asking for money. So it'll be interesting to see whether she comes out. I think we mentioned BC Day simply because Kelowna, WAC Bennett. BC Day was, I believe, brought in by WAC Bennett, or certainly very closely identified with that era. Is that the moment to pull the trigger? If not, I guess it'll be right after Labor Day, but that's leaving, a whole nother month on the table.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, as we say, one to watch. My first politician to watch over the next month or so is former federal Green leader Elizabeth May. Not just because there is a federal election coming up, spoiler alert, but because, well, we've talked about it on the show. There is a slow-burning coup going on in what's left of the federal Green Party. I shouldn't say what's left because they have 2 MPs, and that's right about where they have been. But there is a very ugly and distracting, I guess is a word to put it, effort to unseat their still newly elected leader, Annamie Paul. And the only reason I reference Elizabeth May is, without putting too fine a point on it, those who are trying to get rid of Annamie Paul would listen to Elizabeth May. She has a lot of currency in that group, and she probably could squash this either behind the scenes or even publicly. But the only statement she's put out about it was a very sort of distant, anodyne one, which seemed to sort of hint at a member-driven effort to remove Annamie Paul the very next day, calling into question the leader's actual membership in the party. It's all very ridiculous. And so, how Elizabeth May acts and conducts herself, especially if we're going into a federal election while this is all going on, will be very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I agree. Suspicious in her silence. There's a lot of buzz that this is some sort of way for her to get back in there, but
and if that's not true, she could just say so very easily publicly.
Yeah. Say, I disagree with this, or I do agree with this, whatever you want to say, but come out and say it. I don't know. That party for so long was such a, there was no party, it was her, and every resource was dedicated to trying to keep her elected. At some point, they have to decide if they're going to, be a grown-up party and actually do grown-up things. And right now, they are not. So we will wait and see. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath for the Elizabeth May clearing the air interview.
Your second politician to watch this summer.
Okay, this is the person who I think right now is probably running second in the leadership race, and that is Ellis Ross. And here's what I can tell you about Ellis. Every time Ellis puts out a message to the BC Liberal membership and lapsed members and other places asking for members, we get a little trickle of members into Langley East. So that tells me that some of this straight talk messaging is resonating. I thought he was very good around Canada Day. I thought that was a natural kind of platform for him. I think BC Day will be another one. Although I don't sense the same kind of, there was something despairing about Canada Day this year. It was very difficult. I don't sense that same feeling around BC Day, but BC Day has never been celebrated in the same way Canada Day has. So, maybe it just doesn't hold that same kind of that sense. But keep an eye on Ellis Ross. I think they're making progress on that team and in that campaign. And if I were a betting man, I'd bet that he's running second right now.
Interesting in that he was the first, when we've talked many times about his sort of unofficial entry into the race, which was basically a leak. I shouldn't say that, an accidental comment. I don't think it was a leak.
It's called truthfulness. It's called truthfulness.
Yeah, exactly. And so in some ways he was the first, but he's been kind of the quietest for a long stretch of time. But there is a sense, you're right, there is a sense that campaign is picking up steam. At the very least, people are starting to receive communications from them. You're seeing more and more of him in the news. And he is the candidate of all the ones so far who sort of stands out the most in that his message is very different because he's very different. Yeah. And so you're right, it'll be fascinating to watch. Yeah,
and just before we jump off that, I think he's also helped by the fact that the Haisla First Nation now is advocating for a major LNG project under Chief Councillor Crystal Smith. That reinforces the message and gives him that opportunity to talk about, look, we were a community with nothing and we've turned it around into one that now is talking about multi-billion-dollar projects. That was on my watch and I built that team and off we go. So I do think that is still a very powerful narrative for BC Liberals who are kind of flailing around in the dark a little bit and have been made to feel bad about supporting economic prosperity for so long.
Which is weird considering, the NDP support the biggest LNG project in Canada's history. But you're right, it's one to watch. My next one to watch is a cop-out, Jordan. I will admit this off the top. It is fascinating watching with municipal elections next year. Various candidates start to get their ducks in a row, some of them officially, some of them sort of quietly behind the scenes, but, in a way that people can see. We've talked many times about the very crowded field in Vancouver, which continued again this week. Mark Marison sort of officially launching his campaign there. And we saw an official challenger in Surrey with Councillor Brenda Locke going against her former colleague, or former ally, I should say, Doug McCallum. That'll be a fascinating race to watch. Here where I am in Victoria, there's a lot of rumors and rumblings about, who will run in fact, if the current mayor, Lisa Helps, runs again, and if not, or even if she does, who will run against her. And in cities across BC, there's going to be this playing out on either larger or smaller scales. And it's going to be fascinating to watch because you're right, it is sort of fundraising season. And so the time to get started is right now, and it'll be interesting to watch no matter where you are in BC.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think the way, if I recall correctly, I haven't checked recently, but the way the Municipal Donations Act is structured is you can get $12.50 per year. So you want to get this year, and you also want to get next year, because that's
exactly
a chance to double up on donations, obviously. Yeah, you're right. There are going to be some very high-profile, interesting races. I'm not really sold on Brenda Locke as a mayoralty candidate. The Indo-Canadian Voice newspaper absolutely shredded her in her announcement.
I saw that. I was taken aback by how strident that was.
It was visceral reaction to Brenda Locke's candidacy. And what I would take from that is a sign that Doug McCallum is still very popular within the South Asian community. Now, that's not everything in Surrey, but that is a huge percentage of the electorate, especially in municipal time, because that community comes out and votes in very strong numbers. So you have Brenda Locke, okay, so what will she attack McCallum on? She can't attack him on SkyTrain, he delivered. She can attack him on Surrey Police, but Brenda Locke ran with him last time on transitioning to Surrey Police, put her hand up at that inaugural meeting saying, get to work on transitioning to a Surrey Police force. So it's not like she's been, coming out from the outside and, I've been right. So those are problematic issues for her. I think, if I'm a betting person, if I'm betting on Surrey right now, I'm betting on Doug McCallum to retain, as shocking and surprising to anyone who reads media would think, or Twitter. You just, Doug, he's ensconced and he's delivered on the two things that he promised. And, one's costing a lot more than he expected, but
welcome to government.
Welcome to government. Listen, the RCMP, the biggest problem for the RCMP is always you fund these positions and then the officers don't materialize. And if Surrey can even get close to that, 100% funded position, actual bodies in those jobs rate, that is a huge step forward for policing in Surrey. Frankly, it'll help places like where I live, Langley, because you're not sending 500 RCMP officers to Surrey every year. I just think McCallum, that Indo-Canadian Voice article was eye-opening for me as to the hill that Brenda Locke has to climb in that community.
And we'll see. I mean, she may not even be alone in that race with her and Doug McCallum, so we'll see. Surrey is one of the cities, I think, that the rest of the province will be sort of keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And nothing against, I don't know, Leonard Krogh and Nanaimo, but we won't be watching that one as closely as we will be watching Surrey, Vancouver, Victoria, Burnaby.
What's the Victoria mayor doing? Is Helps running again, or?
Well, there's a lot of questions about that. I don't know the answer to that. It's not public yet. There is some speculation that she may not run again. And there's a lot of guesswork as to whether she runs or not, who else might run. Stephen Andrew won the by-election for city council. He ran in the mayoral election last time, 3 years ago, and he may run again. He's sort of seen as the political counterpoint to Lisa Helps and those who have often voted alongside her. And then there's questions whether or not, everyone's favorite councillor Ben Isett or someone else from that slate, Together Victoria, will run for mayor. So I think Victoria will also be sort of, will get some outsized attention for the city the size it is. And it'll be fascinating next year no matter what.
Yeah, my advice to Stephen Andrews, don't don't do the Hector Bremner thing. Like,
Yeah.
winning a small-scale by-election is not necessarily a precursor of the kind of support you're going to get in a general. And he may want to test his strength in a general election, running for re-election for council before taking the plunge into the mayoralty. Just my advice. I mean, I don't follow Victoria politics closely enough beyond the craziness that happens and beyond what Adam Sterling tweets. So, but I'd be a little careful on that.
I would agree in that. It's just as general advice is that you can only read so much into by-elections, and you're right. That said, God only knows what will happen in the next year. You had three. Who is your third politician to watch over the course of the summer?
Mine is my friend Trevor Halford, and full disclosure, I like Trev, and I've known him for many years, and he's all-around good dude. Trevor, first-term MLA for the BC Liberals out of South Surrey White Rock. Fantastic guy, and I think has had an excellent first year or so as a critic. Did very well in question period, hit some important topics, talked about mental health and opioid addiction in a way that I think was meaningful for a lot of people. So very strong performance out of the gate. He's very much tied into the Kevin Falcon campaign as well, very key to that. But now we hit the dog days of summer, and it's a long time before the ledge sits again in October. And so I'm curious, what does Trevor have up his sleeve for the next 3 or 4 months? How does he kind of integrate further into the community? Summertime is about digging into your community connections and building on those so that election time, you can go back to them and rely on that kind of network of support you have. It's a little bit quieter work, but I still think there's opportunities for Trevor to bring issues to the front that maybe get overlooked by other MLAs.
No, you're absolutely right in that summer is the time when politicians sort of recede from media view. I'm oversimplifying, but the work they do there is what guarantees that they will be seen by the media in later months. It's crucial, vital work that a surprising number of politicians of all stripes just sort of take for granted or start to ignore.
Yeah.
And whether or not people win again in 3 years or lose in 3 years often is a result of what they do or don't do in the summer months. And to your points about Trevor and becoming one of the more effective critics on the opposition bench, I completely agree.
Yeah, no, he's good people, so I'm excited to see his career continue to progress. Look, if it was a term down the road, you might have been talking about him for leader or running for mayor of Surrey or who knows what. So lots to like there about Trevor's trajectory.
My final politician to watch over the rest of the summer. This may surprise you a little bit, Jordan, but it is our premier, John Horgan, and not for the reason you might think. There is already some speculation over whether or not he will choose to run again in 4 years. He may not, and we don't know. He hasn't really come out and said either way. There are good arguments for him to and not to. One of the arguments for him to run again are that he still enjoys right now very high approval ratings and could potentially become the most successful NDP politician ever in this country if he was to win another majority government. But that's a long time from now. BC does not tend to reward many successful elections, and he is getting older. That's not to suggest that there's no issues there, but I mean, John Horgan is smart enough to know that very, very few BC premiers get to leave on their own terms. If he was to announce at some point that he will not be running again in 4 years, then he won't. When he leaves, he won't have that. Well, he left in an ugly way. He was chased out. He was down in the polls. So he'll get to leave on a high, which again, very few premiers and prime ministers get to do. So I would imagine that might be tempting, and he will hate all this speculation, and so will the NDP, quite frankly. But I can tell them it's coming over this month. It's the kind of thing that the media love to do. They're very interested in doing, and I will say this as well. John Horgan sometimes is very honest. When he has a live mic in front of him and says things that he may not, may have been not particularly well considered and come out wrong. And so if he is asked if he's running again and he hesitates in any way, this is the kind of thing that sort of builds. So we'll see. I
don't know. I think it's a little early still. What usually prompts it is you see cabinet ministers jockeying for position.
Yes.
And, as desperate a media hound as David Eby is, I don't sense any increase in that media houndness or organization. Like, I don't sense any growth, any uptick in that. You did leave out Horgan's age. Like, I think he is 62, 63?
Something like that, yeah.
So, 65. He's been, was he an 05 guy? Did he win in 05 or 09?
I believe it was 05.
05, so he'd be maxed out at pension, literally maxed out, because he'd have his 20 years plus you're not making any more money in government than you are as premier, so he'd be maxed out at that. He could retire quite comfortably and he'll walk out with $120,000, $125,000 a year, fully indexed, blah, blah, blah. It's my old Taxpayers Federation math hat going on there. It is interesting, right? Like, you come to a point where he may sit down and be like, okay, so I've been premier for, 8 years by that time?
Yeah.
Things are good. I can hand this off in a nice way, be sort of seen as the statesman of the left for a long time to come, in a way that took Mike Harcourt some time to rebuild to get to that position. Horgan can step into immediately. And, if I stay, I'm basically working as premier for $130,000 a year, because that's what's up and above the pension. Is that really worth all the stress and Twitter fights and, having to deal with Rob Shaw and Vaughn Palmer and all those people?
Yes.
Probably.
And he would still be young enough that he can do pretty much whatever he wants afterwards. I mean, I was joking with someone the other day, if Justin Trudeau is still prime minister 4 years from now, when John Horgan would be contemplating his next job, I mean, ambassador to Ireland, who knows? or nothing. He could just stay in Langford and be happy. And you're right, I think there would be a certain appeal in being, as you describe it, the elder statesman of the left in a way that no other former NDP leader really managed to do. And so, these are valid questions. They won't like them. I agree with you. They're early, but this is what media does. Yep. Some of this will probably get overshadowed by the federal election. That, spoiler alert, is coming next month. But it'll be interesting. The first time he's asked this question, which I think will be soon, his answer will be important, both in the words he gives and the tone he has.
Yeah, I think part of it too will depend on his relationship with David Eby, because everyone expects David Eby to, walk into that job after Horgan leaves. Yeah, there's the Selena Robinsons, and then there's the Bowen Ma fans. Although I think that's a little overstated at this point. Adrian Dix won't go again. I don't know who else there would be within that caucus to take a stab at it. Maybe an outsider like a Brad West or someone like that. Yeah. But it would really be Eby's race to lose. Politics, Horgan, I think, would be the first to tell you that he has a big ego. And, if you don't, I don't see him wanting to hand this off to someone who maybe he's frustrated with or doesn't get along with or doesn't feel like has kissed the ring properly. Which I don't know the relationship between Eby and Horgan. I have theories, but they're, I'm not inside NDP land, so who knows? But that would, I think, be a big factor in this as well.
Yeah, and for the NDP, there would be, I'll just call them complications, if another straight white man inherits that title. Which, I mean, if it's David Eby or whoever else, Brad West or whoever else, they would at least have to have a very good answer and a very good strategy for addressing that, because, I mean, that will come up and it will be an issue.
Oh, that's a good point. But they skirted it with Nathan Cullen.
Well, I mean, yes, but that was a much smaller scale with a lot else going on. You're right. But that writ large over the course of an entire leadership campaign with literally, the premiership of the province at stake, that would be a thing.
I guess it depends how active the far left are within their coalition at that point.
Or how noisy they can be in getting outsized attention on social media. Yeah,
and I know on Capital Direct over there, you talked about Bob Dewar retiring. And Dewar was very much the first pragmatic NDPer we saw. The guy came in and said, look, let's sacrifice the principle of road pricing in order to win by getting rid of the portmanteau. He asked himself the old Dr. Phil question, would I rather be right or would I rather be happy? Bob Dewar would rather be happy. He somehow convinced John Horgan, let's also be happy. Let's win this election instead of dying on the same tired principles over and over again. So there, that group would be important too. Do the principled ideologues, the Fairy Creek protesters, are are they the ones who, would they actually blow up the chances at electoral success by pushing a very left-leaning, less pragmatic leader? Maybe.
It's entirely possible. It depends on the rules of the leadership campaign and what happens from there. But you're right. We'll see.
Kevin Falcon hopes so.
Yeah. And after that, I mean, boy, Jordan, we have more than 2 weeks until we meet again.
Yes.
Any predictions for what the world will look like in T plus 16 days or whatever it is?
Well, first, Jillian Stead turned this off. The important news breaking out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Aaron Charles Rodgers will report to the Packers training camp. He might be a day or two late, but he's coming. So that's good news for Packer fans like me as we get one last dance with the great Aaron Rodgers. The helm, it's Super Bowl or bust for that team this year. And I'm here for it. One last, his 17th and likely final season in Green Bay. So let's do it upright.
Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for your next year's Super Bowl champion Denver Broncos.
That seems unlikely.
On several fronts.
It's more likely that Bo Levi Mitchell will get signed by the Packers and lead them to a Super Bowl than Aaron Rodgers going to Denver.
They cannot have him. And that's, August 5th, the CFL season starts. I am eagerly anticipating wasting a few more Fridays watching football.
It's going to be so good. I can't wait. I can't wait for Friday Night Football. I've been watching the Olympics. And what a weird Olympics this is. Like, no fans. Skateboarding is an Olympic sport. And then you watch it for half an hour and all they seem to do is miss tricks. Like, what is happening here?
I have not seen a single moment of the Olympics. I mean, I've seen some highlights on Twitter, but I haven't tuned in. I have just absolutely no interest in the Summer Olympics. I'm not saying they suck, and I'm not saying you're wrong if you're watching them. It's not.
Yeah. Watching
foot races, I just can't. It just doesn't do anything for me, and I'm great if Namibia wins. Great if they don't win. I'm okay either way.
I live with an 11-year-old sports addict, so I was like, Jack, I'm going to introduce you to something great. It's called the Olympics, and it's on all the time for 2 weeks, like wall-to-wall sports. So we were watching men's field hockey, and Canada lost to Great Britain. But we were then had this long 20-minute debate, him and I, whether Connor McDavid would make a good field hockey player. Yeah. And what skills would be transferable? Foot speed. I don't know how fast Connor McDavid runs, but stick handling's tricky because I don't think you can hit the back of. I don't think you can hit the round side of your field hockey stick. I think you always have to be on the forehand.
I have no idea. I was today years old when I learned that we had a men's field hockey team. I genuinely did not know that. That'd be fascinating. That'd be a great fundraiser. If Canada's men's field hockey team against a collection of NHL All-Stars playing men's field hockey, I would watch that.
Yeah. Well, you can't block shots with your body either. Like, it's only with your stick.
I don't think you'd want to.
No. Nope.
I don't think you'd want to.
And then the funny thing is the goalie lets in a goal, and Jack goes, Carey Price would have had that. You're like, dude, it's like totally different. Like, it's like the net's twice as big. Who knows? Like, anyways, it was a whole thing. So there you go.
Fair enough. I guess in 2 weeks we'll know whether or not how the rest of Canada did in the Olympic hole. Everything I said aside, I hope we do very well.
That's
it's still Canada.
That's right.
Until then, enjoy the next 2 weeks and have very happy politics as always. He's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K, and this has been one of my most awkward sign-offs ever.
Yeah. Land this plane. Land the plane, Maclean. Talk to you later.